welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. We're gonna have another extended visit to the chud rotisserie. But I think we're just gonna have to start out with another fireside twat.
Well, hi everybody.
Yeah, fuck off.
And welcome to the Fireside Chat. So I have a very challenging thought before I take your question.
That would be a change.
There is a verse, actually a law. There are 613 laws in the Torah, the first 5 books.
Like, who's he telling this to is a question to ask.
All the laws of the Bible are in the first 5 books, the Torah, which are the most important books of the Bible. I know people don't like to make measurements. They don't like to say bigger sin or lesser sin or more.
Well, I get the feeling a lot of people do kind of like to say that. Did they? I get the feeling, particularly, Dennis, a lot of the people you hang with, yeah, I think they are kind of big on that, because there's certain of those laws that they don't give a shit about, and there are other of them that they're fucking obsessed with. Especially anything that allows them to intrude in other people's fucking sexuality.
Or good or lesser good, but I'm a big believer in that. Anyway, the first 5 books are the basis of the Old and New Testaments. There is a law which I would like to apply to modern American life. And if you're listening outside of America, I think you will find this just as important. So the law is Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 7. And I want to remind you, incidentally, that the latest volume of my Bible commentary is Deuteronomy.
Wait a second. He has a whole, the latest volume of his Bible commentary?
Which is not well known, even certainly by name, but I'd just like you to know, for your interest, it is the most cited book of any, including any secular book, any Enlightenment book, any Greek or Roman classic, or any biblical book. It is the most often cited book by the founders of the United States of America.
Well, okay, so that's a good reason to ignore it, I would suppose.
And it's the second most cited book by Jesus in the New Testament from the Old Testament, which is the only Bible he knew, obviously. And
that may actually be a fairly challenging thought to most of the people who watch this shit.
That is Deuteronomy. The first, by the way, was Psalms, in case you're curious, in the terms of Jesus' citations. The law is, do not hate an Egyptian.
Which is kind of funny for him to be citing, because PragerU, last I checked, has a huge amount of content inciting hatred of Muslims, and last I checked, most Egyptians today kinda anti-Muslim. So, I mean, if this is such an important law to Dennis, then maybe he needs to revise his editorial policy, because he is really encouraging people to hate on Egyptians.
It's an amazing law. Amazing. The Israelites had just spent horrible, long years of slavery, generations of slavery in Egypt.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how now all of a sudden he's happy to talk about the horrors of slavery? Usually it's like, oh, just, that was just a thing that happened, get over it. And now we're talking about how horrible it was?
And there's a law, if you believe it, and I do, given by God, if not, given by Moses,
Which, I mean, also not a reason to actually give a shit about it.
And if you will, in the name of God, doesn't matter. But there's the law, and it is ancient, and it is probably to the generation that has just left Egypt, and forever. You cannot hate an Egyptian. Why is this so important?
Well, gee. Now, color me absolutely shocked. I am just falling out of my chair here. What he's saying, see, is that, see, he considers it hating white people to hate racism, but not in the sense that you necessarily can't meaningfully oppose racism without acknowledging that whiteness itself is a white supremacist construct that any dismantlement of a racist system is going to get rid of. This is lecturing black people.
I wish that there were leaders in America today saying to black America, you cannot hate a white.
Well, it would really help if white people were doing a little bit. See, the idea, I would guess. Now, I have not read Deuteronomy. I don't really intend to read Deuteronomy. This has not actually made me change the decision that I wasn't particularly keen on. I didn't see any reason to read Deuteronomy. But I'm guessing the idea was not so much, you can't hate any Egyptian no matter what they do going forward, so much as you can't hold, you can't hold the stuff in the past against them. And you can disagree with that. I think that actually sometimes you fucking can. Especially if it's the generation that was actually directly involved in the stuff, then yeah, I think you can to some extent. I think you have to be a bit differentiated about it, but it's certainly understandable. But here, he's just sort of applying it more generally. Like, no matter what white people do, like, create a fucking channel like this, where they have the world's blandest white supremacist propaganda. Hello, Phoenix. How you doing? Well, yeah, you can't even hate the ones who are doing that, is clearly what he's going for.
That is so relevant and so important. This issue of
Yes, to like the 5 black people who are watching this.
Hatred of whites among some blacks in America is never touched because people are afraid. Cowardice is the human.
And also because honestly, it's a bit ridiculous. Because the thing is, there is a reason that actually people who are on the uncomfortable side of white supremacy maybe have a little bone or two to pick with the people who are on the comfortable side, and but yeah, it's true. I mean, if you don't count all the shit on talk radio, like every time like fucking Rush Limbaugh or any of those motherfuckers opens their mouths, if you don't count all the like right-wing noise machine of which this is a particularly incompetently run part, yeah, nobody ever talks about how bad white people have it around black people. Without, pointing out that probably those white people may have actually done something to piss those black people off, because usually that's how that works. Well, yes, but you're not really watching this. You're watching me hate watching this, which is a distinction that is important in particular because their algorithm, they don't get boosted in the algorithm by the fact that you're watching. But they do get boosted by the fact that I am, but I mean, they already get so much fucking love from the algorithm, I don't think it matters that much.
Norm. There's no other explanation because everybody know it exists. And if not hatred, resentment, anger, you name...
Yeah, I wonder why that is.
...the negative emotion. If hatred is too strong, the other two will suffice. And it's particularly remarkable given that, we are now living 160 or so years after slavery. This is not the
Well, that kind of depends. Yeah, it ended on paper in 1865. And then immediately, well, after Reconstruction ended anyway, half the country came up with laws. First of all, set up literal fucking death squads, state sponsored, in order to essentially ensure that the political rights that black people had just gotten in the 14th and 15th Amendment were basically non-existent, and then fucking decided to just make a whole bunch of laws so they could get about it, so they could reproduce just about everything in slavery but the fucking name. And that's before we even get to the shit that goes on in prison right now. So yeah, and also 150 years, that isn't actually that long. Like, people who are alive today are old, there are people who are alive today who are old enough to have met people who lived through that.
first generation after slavery. This is 160 years later, and there was still...
Well, I wonder, did anything happen? Come on, Dennis. You're the fucking scholar. This is Prager University. School me. Did anything happen after the Emancipation Proclamation that may have less than totally endeared black people to the white community?
Still a great deal of hatred and resentment. Now, of course, there was Jim Crow and racism in the meantime.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, of course, but I mean, how's anyone gonna feel bad about that? That was like 5 minutes ago.
It's not like the day slavery ended, treatment of blacks was wonderful.
Yeah, which is why it's kind of ridiculous that you're acting like... See, you're acting like it's such a long time ago. How could anyone still be pissed off about it? Like, I mean, this is like acting... This is... And what gets me about this is he doesn't, you can tell he does not really believe in what he's saying here, because he immediately is qualifying this. He's immediately qualifying it because he knows what he's saying is ridiculous. There are people in the right-wing bullshitosphere who would actually skip over this bit. Hell, thinking about it, pretty much all of my history and social studies instruction in school up until the age of, let's say, about 15? Did skip over all of it. But he actually knows better than to say this, and there is a part of him, clearly, that can't just skip over it.
I'm not claiming that, I know that.
You kind of started out by claiming it, though.
But...
And it undermines your whole position.
In the post-World War II era.
By the way, Phoenix, how's my audio? Are you hearing me okay? I had somebody say earlier, on my earlier stream this afternoon, that my voice was way down, my voice mic, and so I just want to be sure that I don't need to make any adjustments there before we get in too far. So, you hearing me okay over him? Because between the two of us, I know you'd rather hear me. I'd rather hear me. Everyone would rather hear me. Nobody wants to hear this guy. Excellent. That's what I was hoping. Because I think what actually happened was my speakers were on too loud, and they were actually playing over my voice mic, so that you couldn't actually hear me earlier, and I figure that's probably fixed now. I also moved the mic away from my speakers.
And certainly in the civil rights era and on, the reasons...
You see, but here's the problem. Here's the problem, Dennis. Because you were just talking 160 years. The minute you bring it into the civil rights era, you're talking about some shit that people are still remember. You're talking about stuff that happened in the lifetime of, probably in his lifetime.
For a black to resent whites...
A black.
Certainly receded And I would like to remind
Yeah, but the thing about receding, like the tide, it recedes, but it does come back. Receding does not mean that it's gone. It just means that maybe things have seemed to somewhat improved. Like, if you've got like 10 plus rated pain, and you get two fucking naproxens, yeah, the pain will recede a little bit. It's still fucking there.
people that, unlike the Egyptians, vast numbers of American whites died in a war that ended slavery. Just that.
Yeah, and that was actually why did that pivot into being a war to end slavery? Because I don't remember that actually. It's interesting because it wasn't actually the white people who were trying to run that war who wanted to make it that. It was the fact that all the fucking enslaved black people who came in contact with Union soldiers were providing huge amounts of intel to them to the extent that essentially they could not fight the war without this, like, essentially black fifth column within the Confederacy providing them all the intel and sabotaging and everything like that. And it turned out the only way you could actually effectively fight that war is if it was very much a war against slavery. But the people who ran that war at the start, that wasn't what they were going for. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and not even just grandma either. I mean, it's like shit happens every single day.
That's important. No Egyptians died fighting Pharaoh's slavery.
Well, I mean, uh, see, I seem to remember Passover by the Passover ceremony a little bit differently because we actually, I say we as if it hasn't been like 20 years since I actually did anything with Passover. You take a couple of drops out of your wine glass for all of the suffering of the Egyptians due to the plagues that were sent in order to convince Pharaoh to change his mind about the whole slavery thing. So even if you're accepting just the biblical narrative without question, clearly, if you take that, Egyptians did suffer a little bit. Like the fucking death of the firstborn. Actually, wasn't the death of the firstborn is the thing. That's where we get the term Passover, because one of the plagues was the death of the firstborn, and you used some blood from a lamb shank and wrote it on your door to say, yeah, not this place. So yeah, actually, according to the fucking biblical narrative, yes, Egyptians, like completely innocent fucking Egyptians died, as part of ending the slavery of the Israelites, for fuck's sake.
So this is a really big deal. If you're black and you take the Bible seriously, this is as applicable a law as I can imagine. Don't hate the white. But
Jesus. This is
the
painful
irony
to watch.
is that the biggest fomenters of hatred of whites are whites.
Yeah, I mean, because it's true. The hatred of white people would probably subside if white people weren't constantly doing things to piss off everybody else.
White leftists, white wokeists, whatever term you wish to use, white progressives, they foment hate.
So black people don't even get the like respect of having of being the ones foment who actually have decided, supposedly according to this bullshit narrative, have decided to just hate white people for apparently no reason except for all that shit that he felt forced to acknowledge because he knows that it's there, and it would be ridiculous, even by his standards, not to acknowledge it. He's like, no, this has to be. It has to. He's gonna have to, like. He attributes anti-white sentiment to white people. Yeah, well, I see. I actually wouldn't give him the credit of understanding the whole construction of whiteness thing. I mean, that my impression is that isn't exactly general knowledge. Like, people don't really. It. I mean, I certainly. I mean, as somebody whose background, whose like fucking historical family background is very much impacted by how that construction, what form it took in one place in time versus another. Even I mean, I didn't really hear anything about it, so I wouldn't be surprised if he knows no, he has no idea. He doesn't even think about the construction of it. He just sort of takes it for granted. Just as he sort of takes for granted that the reactionary, anti-Semitic white fuckers that he's cozying up to consider him to be on the same side of the line as they are.
The black left and the white left basically almost live on white hatred, white resentment.
You know, I love. This is so inspiring. Really, you go over to Dennis Prager, and suddenly the left is powerful in the U.S. Yeah, people who can't bother to learn these things really shouldn't be speaking on them, left or right. Yeah, totally. I mean,
White supremacy.
I mean, what gets me about this as well, especially considering that Prager himself is Jewish and seems to actually have some tolerable grasp of Jewish European history. Yeah, it has to have at least some awareness of what demographic, out of all of the demographics in the world, has been the most dangerous one for Jews to live near. It's fucking white Christians. Like, nobody has done as much shit to us over the over the centuries as white ass Christians. Not Muslims. We actually, like, European Jews have repeatedly fled to, the Middle East and North Africa, specifically because it was safer to be with, Arabs and Muslims. Oh, a lot of white leftists talk out their asses on radio. No shit. Yeah. Constantly. I mean, so much of it. I mean, there's just so much stuff that people, like, they read one article and suddenly that's all they're gonna fucking talk about. But, I mean, he talks about resentment of white Christians as if it's, like, just something, that as if it's something that would not apply at all to Jews. And that ain't how that works. Because white Christians, I mean, the people who have actually experienced, like, really nasty, old-timey anti-Semitism from are his fucking target audience here. Like, the ones who really don't just let it all hang out. Those are the ones, fucking white ass Christians.
And white fragility and all these Chinese Revolution like classes and courses and
Chinese Revolution like
seminars at businesses and schools on racism. And if you're a white and you deny you're a racist, you're a bigger racist.
Well, actually, it's not really how any of that works, because the whole point of it, I mean, not to say that there aren't fucking seminars like this that are done badly by annoying liberals who don't really need to shut the fuck up. I mean, that, like you say, Tim Wise would be a good example. Or what's her name with the blue eye, brown eye thing? Who says that racism is just ignorance. Yeah, she also needs to shut the fuck up, and she makes tons of money on that shit. But anyone who's doing these things properly, and I know that there are people out there doing them properly, I've seen it, will say, it's not about the individual attitude, it doesn't actually matter that much what you definitely have. We're living in a fucking white supremacist society. It's an organizing principle of the thing, and of course it's gonna fucking rub off on you, and you just need to deal with that. Yeah, it's true.
And if you don't deny you're a racist anyway. You're a racist, just being
Yeah, because it's a racist-ass society.
white. That's a terrible lie, a horrible lie, a destructive lie, and it's
As opposed to the constructive lies that his website tells people.
as at least as bad for black people as it is for white people. That's the irony.
I see, it's because he cares about the black people that he is so concerned that there are people who will point out that racism exists. I mean, and once again, it's the seminars and shit. Like nobody in the black community would be saying, it's like the society doesn't really care much about us if there weren't fucking, DEI seminars telling them that there is racism. I just have a feeling that that's not how that works, actually. That maybe the society keeps on impressing that there is racism directly without any need for anyone to explain it to anybody.
Because you can't be a happy or healthy person if you walk around feeling that you're a victim.
Well, surely that's on the people doing the victimizing, Dennis.
And hating a certain group of people in your midst.
You mean kind of like you do with Muslims all the fucking time?
It's just not going to be good for you on any level. My wife raised...
Notice that his dog is demonstratively absent from this talk. Even his fucking dog doesn't want to hear him talking about
this issue with her trainer. And he happens to be a black...
George Carlin did a whole thing on this nonsense. He happens to be black. It's a fucking accident, he said. That always...
individual. And he
happens to be a black individual. Like, Jesus. It's like, are you just racking up the cliches here, Dennis?
Told her that this was such an important subject to him.
Yeah, probably.
He is one of, I don't remember, I think 7 children. And only 2 of them, he said, we were all raised to resent and even hate whites.
Well, it's interesting how this guy who works for your wife is actively confirming the prejudices your wife has no doubt expressed to him. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like you probably aren't going to be challenged by somebody whose job depends on you liking them.
All 7 of us.
I mean, not even a black Freddy. Like all he's got is like fucking Thomas Friedman. All he's got is there's this black guy who works for my wife, and he agrees with her.
So at this point, let me remind you that because we have reason to worry that one day YouTube, which is owned by Google, will simply say, no more PragerU on our platform.
Oh, that would be such a fucking tragedy.
Because of how much censoring takes place.
By which he means the way in which Google heavily favors them in the algorithm, which is why even before I had watched a single one of their videos or even any kind of related content, my recommendations were full of this crap.
Hope it never happens, but
I mean, now my
in light of that,
are a fucking
we
nightmare.
would ask you at this point to watch the rest of this fireside chat or listen to the rest of this fireside chat at prageru.com. Our hope is that you'll simply go to prageru.com every week.
Yeah, go to prageru.com every week. Jesus.
And see the fireside chat there. For which reason, we also recommend that you get the PragerU app, and then...
yeah, so you can send over your personal data to these motherfuckers. I'm sure that can't go wrong.
You just click on that, and everything else follows. So go to PragerU.
You click on the PragerU app and everything else follows. That's not ominous at all.
.com, and we'll continue.
Okay, so that was our fireside twat for the day. And wow. I mean, he made so many... I can't even sarcastically say that this motherfucker made any good points. Because he very obviously, I mean... Even he very clearly was actually uncomfortable with some of what he was saying there. Because he qualified the hell out of it. Okay. Now, let's see. Got some Caleb Muppet. We've got, Tim Pool. Okay, you're in California. There was, in Glendale, the school board had a vote to decide whether they would acknowledge Pride Month, and a whole bunch of Nazis showed up and attacked parents who were there to support, the LGBT community, or were members of the LGBT community, or had fucking LGBT kids. And Tim Pool saw that and thought that was wonderful. And so, we've got a thing where he's trying to justify, literal Nazis. How to identify... That's right, okay. Yeah, we got some time. How to identify a Nazi YouTuber. Hang on.
Alright, everybody. So, for a little while now, I've been doing this recurring segment, and they're a lot of fun, and you guys
we started to watch this last week, didn't we? Because he's about to say how he's mining old videos for content, because he's running out of bullshit to say himself.
Really enjoying them, so I figure, why not keep doing them? Where we go back, like years and years ago, and we dig up an old lefty video essay from, like, the old, like, in my opinion, golden era of leftist, like, content online.
So, okay, we already know that this golden era must have sucked shit.
We go over that content because, surprisingly, a lot of you in my community weren't even into politics back then.
Yeah, probably a lot of them weren't even born back then. Because anyone who's actually old enough to remember anything, in politically is going to find him at the very least an imposition.
Like 3 or 4 years ago, you guys weren't even into politics. It's bizarre to me that so many of you haven't seen these videos that are so oftentimes referenced and, like, so fundamental to lefty memes and whatnot. Like, how many times have you heard...
I mean, it's fundamental to the memes. Then we really must. It's an important part of political education. I can tell you a little bit about Xander Fuck's audience. It's a lot of reactionaries, it turns out, and a lot of Bush fans. There's a lot of overlap between these two groups. Hello, Adria.
Example. Recently, I had a few chatters not understand where the sell your houses to who, their houses to who, Ben, Aquaman meme comes from.
It comes from fucking climate change. I mean, what's to understand it? The whole point of it is that rising sea levels mean there's absolutely no point, that at some point selling people's fucking people who are living in areas that are going to be affected by rising sea levels are going to be left with some land they can't use, can't access, and that they're never going to be able to sell because it's under fucking water. Like,
I ran into several lefties in my chat who didn't know where that line comes from. And that reminded me, holy shit, it's been nearly half a decade.
wow, that's a huge amount of time. I mean, just the other week we were hearing Caleb Maupin talking about how he's been around in this shit for more than a decade and a half, and that was already ridiculous. But now we're talking like a half a decade is ancient history. Motherfucker, if my nieces were alive for it, it isn't ancient history.
And some of these videos that have literally been memeified because they're so good, there's a fair amount of lefties who have never seen these videos before.
Like, I mean, okay. It's kind of neat to know H. Bomber Guy said that, because I have a feeling, I mean, he has a nice voice. It would probably have sounded really good. But, I mean, it doesn't... I understand the meme without knowing that H. Bomber Guy said it.
And I haven't seen a lot of them in a long ass time.
That's what makes a meme good.
So I figured, what better way to sort of give ourselves the opportunity for, in my case, to refresh ourselves in these videos, and in your case, in a lot of your cases, to see them for the first time, than to watch them on stream and go over them and do an in-depth reaction and response to them. Less of a response and more of like a review, right? This video that we're about to respond to, or review, is from 3 Arrows. It's 3 years old at this point. It came out back in 2020, which it's wild to think.
Wow, that's a third of a decade ago. Jimmy Dore Orbit? No, I don't think so. I actually would say he's probably not pro Jimmy Dore. I think he probably is more or less anti Jimmy Dore because not for good reasons, I should note. I mean, yeah, Jimmy Dore sucks shit, but probably not because Jimmy Dore sucks shit so much as because Vush doesn't like Jimmy Dore. So, and he basically does, he's Vush's fucking little pocket chud. I was still in my 30s 5 years ago.
That 2020 was that long ago. But very early 2020. Around the time I started doing, like, YouTube content with politics, like, really for real.
You still don't do it really for real. Like, what, how for fake was it then that this is more for real than that? Because this is pretty for fake.
I started early 2019, but it really got to be serious early 2020.
It still isn't serious.
So a lot of you guys weren't into politics around that time, so hopefully a lot of you guys haven't seen this video before, and perhaps many of you haven't even heard of 3 Arrows and will be introduced to it.
See, I really don't think that he wants to do this, really, because introducing people to actual, like, leftist YouTubers who, at least in some cases, will inevitably have better takes than Xanderhole is just it's just a way for Xanderhole to buy a quick humiliation, really.
To his content from this. In fact, there will be a link pinned in the comments down below. The top
3 years ago. The pandemic is like just barely 3 years old.
Top pinned comment will be a link to this video, and I highly recommend you guys go like and subscribe both 3 Arrows videos and to 3 Arrows channel, because they make some fantastic content. You are really, really missing out if you are not, like, subbed and watching their videos, because even now they're making great content, but especially the backlog, there are some real bangers that 3 Arrows has
that's not what a backlog is.
Made. So, yeah. Let's hop into watching this video. This is called, and the title in particular really interests me.
See, what interests me is that it'll be easier. See, Xanderhole is infinitely more watchable if he's watching somebody and reacting to somebody who is, like, less painful to watch than him. And that's kind of that's a very large number of people who are less painful to watch than the Xanderhole.
As like a topic for us to cover on this stream. YouTube and the politics of pessimism. I think you guys who've been watching me a lot might understand how lately the topic of this video might apply to some of the things I've been discussing. Let's hop right in.
Hey, what's up? So, I love making response videos. They are fun to make, they generally do well, and they are a great
and
vehicle
it's
to get
very,
a larger
and
point
as someone
across.
who loves
You know, someone clicks to see...
making response videos, I like it because it's also seriously low effort content. I mean, I've done video essays. I've done response videos. Response videos, you just sort of sit here and you watch shit and you say, oh, wow, that's neat. Oh, well, that sucks. Oh, well, did you know that this other thing that's related to what dude was just saying? And it is so fucking easy to do. I mean, it's like, kind of like the reason... A friend of mine who's a pastry chef in Chile was telling me why there are so many sushi restaurants in Santiago. You know, her insider's view from the restaurant industry. And the reason is that it's like the sushi, especially sort of low-end sushi, is the response video of seafood. Because it's cheap as fuck to make. Because you aren't running fucking ovens and, you know, gas fucking cookers and everything all the time. Yeah, I think Xanderhole does think he's clever.
Stephen Crowder get dunked on and hopefully leaves with a better understanding of a certain topic. Last year, when my channel was much smaller, I took a look at a video of a YouTuber called Black Pigeon Speaks. The video, on the surface, seemed to be about the decay of the West, but...
The decay of the West? Well, that's already a fucking serious brown flag.
that was largely just a front to...
For those who don't know, Black Pigeon Speaks is a Nazi, and it was obvious back then, but...
Well, I mean, the fact that he's doing a video on the decline of the West, I mean, if your audience doesn't hear the decline of the... If you're supposedly educating people about fascism, and that's why that's what justifies the money you're making and the platform you've got. You know, you're educating people about fascist propaganda and debunking it and stuff like that, because he does kind of claim to be doing that every once in a while. And people don't immediately understand that if somebody's talking about the decline of the West, they're listening to a Nazi, then you fucked up. I know it sucks, believe me.
Even then, a lot of lefty figures, just, you gotta be careful. Like, if you're a lefty online, and you're doing a formal response to another far-right figure, or to another figure who's far-right, at least back then, you had to be a lot more careful when it came to using the word Nazi. Like, the right sees the word Nazi as their N-word.
Yeah, except that's bullshit, and also fuck them.
That's pretty much it, yeah. Nazi is a right-winger's N-word.
Well, he managed to find a way to say this. That he managed to come up with a way to discuss the fact that the far right often, I mean, with the exception of, so there are quite a few very explicit neo-Nazis out there who are very cool with the word, but a lot of the people they hang with like to, like to pretend that there's something completely different, and because, you know, it's, most people understand that if it has Nazi on the tin, it sucks shit. And he manages to find a way to say this that trivializes racism. So we're keeping a theme here because that's what fucking Dennis Prager in his Fireside Twat was saying too. He was also trivializing racism.
Like, if you call them a Nazi, they will react like you called them the N-word.
Yeah, well, yeah, fuck them. Who gives a shit?
Really. It was like if you were like a lefty figure trying to dunk on a conservative figure and you called them a Nazi or a fascist, you already lost the debate. You already lost the argument.
Well, which is why debating with them is bullshit. It's why there's absolutely no point. Because you're not... Their audience, for the most part, has a very different concept of what it means to succeed in that debate than what you have going into it. Because they consider anything that allows them to get their fucking bullshit, fucked up talking points onto a larger platform a win. They don't care that, you have some liberal, let's say, clowning on them and everything, because they know the people they're going for didn't actually recognize that that's what was going on.
They literally say that? Yes, they literally do say that.
To whitewash Holocaust denial.
I've never actually seen anything from Sophie from Mars that suggests that she likes Bellingcat at all, actually. And I would say, actually, that... I mean, when the subject of imperialism comes up, overwhelmingly, she tends to be on the right side of that.
And push some other garbage ideas. What sets this response video apart from my other ones is that I had to go to much greater lengths to figure out what Black Pigeon Speaks is even trying to say. When Stephen Crowder says the big reason for the First Crusade was the fall of Constantinople, it's rather easy
Nobody gives a shit.
for me to point out that this happened hundreds of years after the First Crusade. There you go, debunked. But with a statement like,
it's a German YouTuber who goes by the name Three Arrows. Daniel, I think their name is.
the West...
Something that a lot of people will do is sort of mythologize time periods into one bracket, despite the fact that those brackets can very much vary in size and even overlap with each other.
Yeah, and how there's always a whole lot of different things going on in any span of time of any length.
Like, how many historical eras that you...
When is she supposed to have defended Bellingcat?
you think of as being completely separate events, did you get surprised to later find out happened simultaneously? Like,
Well, the thing about you can have separate events happen simultaneously. Because the world's a big place and all sorts of shit is going on at the same time. Like, the fact that something, say, happens on the other side of the world simultaneously with me doing the stream doesn't mean that my doing this stream is somehow part of that event. It just means they happened at the same time.
Like, there are a lot of really huge world events that were happening on opposite sides of the world from each other. And you think of these, like, particular events and time periods around them as, like, very distinct, but they were happening at the same time, just on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, but that's what I was just saying. That doesn't mean they're not distinct events.
Obviously, Albert Einstein was alive during World War II. That's more common knowledge, so that's not really one. I think there was one involving the building of the pyramids. Obviously, the idea that there were mammoths still on Earth when the pyramids were being built is pretty...
That doesn't mean mammoths were part of the building of the pyramids, though.
Pretty cool. But it was a different one. It was like... When the Roman Empire fell, It's like in Asia, something that's also like really well known happened, but like
Yeah, wow, that's, I mean, something really well known happened in Asia. Yeah, like lots of really well known things were happening in Asia throughout the entire period in which the Roman Empire existed, and they haven't stopped happening there. Like, are we gonna get some? Is it just some really well-known thing?
like when you're taught about it, they're completely different sections of history. You think of them as completely different like eras, but they happen at the same time in just different areas. But we just kind of compartmentalize them into different events and different time periods, sort of.
Well, that's also. I mean, there's actually a meme going around around this, because the thing is, I mean, the time periods don't. It doesn't really make sense to use the same time period names to describe the same years. The same calendar years, the same series of calendar years in different places. Like, to speak of, say, Victorian Brazil, it makes no fucking sense. I mean, or like the pre-Juche United States or something like that. That, I mean, yeah, the U.S. existed during the entire Juche time period, and in North Korea they do actually have a system of years that is Juche plus some 1 year. It's based on the birth of Kim Il Sung. But it makes absolutely no sense to apply that system of counting of dividing up time periods to a place outside of there, any more than it makes sense to talk about like the U.S. The Meiji era U.S. or something like that. Oh, I miss having cats.
Implicitly in our minds. It's weird. Have you seen Ancient Apocalypse or Minute Man series? No, I haven't.
Yeah, that's Ancient Apocalypse. I mean, I think that's some of the actually rather racist Ancient Aliens bullshit.
I have not.
Is dying because it hates.
Oh, you mean like Ancient Apocalypse, like those History Channel shows? Oh, Minuteman. Yeah, he's the guy that debunks the conspiracy theory shit about history. Yeah. Wait, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I've watched Minuteman. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, he debunks the anthropology conspiracy theories and like the aliens built the pyramids type shows. Okay.
Oh, he debunks us. Okay, that's a relief. Servus GGM. Also, das hatte ich zwar nicht vor, aber also ich sag's mal so, ich hatte mir nicht vorgenommen, kein deutsches Video als Reaktionsgegenstand zu nehmen. Wenn du also irgendein deutsches Video vorschlagen möchtest, dann ließe sich unter Umständen vielleicht was machen.
Okay. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Hates itself and no further clarification given, it's not that easy. What is the West in this instance? How is it dying, and how would you even
Well, I
quantify
mean,
a
that's
collection
easy because, we're talking about, Nazis. And when Nazis are talking about the West, they're just talking about white people. And specifically, when they talk about the West, they are not including everybody who lived in the places geographically that are called the West at the time, no matter which time it is. I mean, part of the reason they love the Crusades is because they were big massacres of both Muslims and Jews. They were, that are still fucking. There's a fucking high school who's near me, in the same city anyway, whose sports teams are called the Crusaders, and it's like, well, that's nice. I mean, maybe there should be, that's like having a sports team called the Einsatzgruppen.
of nations.
Oh, you were, okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that stop talking to your chat doofus came up while I was talking to my chat, and I was like, I don't think she means me, but I have not actually seen definitive evidence to the contrary either.
States hating themselves. It's a very bizarre thing to say as far as political commentary goes, but when you get familiar with more of his content,
It's so wild looking back at videos like this and seeing how the conservative, like, attention span changes, right? Like, back then, the big meme, if you were like a Nazi, was to say that you just cared about the West. You were scared the West was going to fall.
That hasn't actually really gone away, though. I mean, especially in the segments of the far right that are, I mean, who still exist, who are obsessed with Muslims, for example. I mean, they in particular love to make shit about the West. I mean, I've definitely seen, you know, fucking fash social media accounts talking about how, I mean, it's the decline of the West.
And that was like the most common thing, and it was a dog whistle, and people didn't really know what it meant. I mean, people did know what it meant.
I mean, dog whistle is a bit. That's giving it a bit of credit. Because the whole concept of the West is already full of white supremacy. It has fucking white supremacism baked right into it, and the people who are constantly concerned about the moral state of the West. Pretty much always fucking some kind of white supremacist of some sort. So I don't know that that's strictly a dog whistle, as that a whole lot of people are in denial.
But a lot of people, unironically, just the dog whistle flew over their heads. They didn't pick up on it. And nowadays we know it so unanimously to be like Nazi shit, but back then, people didn't know it that way. It was just not.
A lot of people did know it that way, Vanderhole. In fact, I think that Three Arrows here was probably one of them. And you know how I know that? Because Three Arrows is German, and in Germany, one of the biggest fucking, like, recent fucking major neo-Nazi groups in Germany has the West right in the name. It's Pegida. Patrioten gegen die sogenannte Islamisierung des Abendlandes. Patriots against the Islamization of the West. So I'm gonna guess I'm gonna guess this was not new to him. And if that was new to you, Xanderhole, I mean, then maybe you should not be acting like a fucking professor. I like the word, yeah, I mean, well, the word ironic is already misused a lot of the time, so unironic necessarily is going to be, but...
Nazis dog whistling about their Nazi shit and calling it, oh, I just want to preserve the West, and people falling for that shit.
Well, I don't know. See, I don't know that people are falling for that shit. Like, they don't realize, like, they're not themselves reactionaries, and they're like, oh, wow, you know, I can totally understand them caring about the West. That doesn't sound at all dodgy to me. I mean, I would say probably that most of the people who heard that and were like, oh, cool, that doesn't sound bad at all, were already fucking reactionaries.
Nowadays, not so much. People are a little bit more knowledgeable of that being blatant Nazi talk, but not so much back then.
It becomes apparent that this sort of bleak narrative about inevitable...
I'd love to see him give some examples of people who were bamboozled by this high-level fucking dog whistle. Because, I mean, that's been an obvious dog whistle to me for a very long time. I mean, it isn't even a dog whistle. It's, I mean, a dog whistle implies at least a couple degrees of concealment. And the decline of the West is just putting it right out there.
Collapse is almost all he talks about. So much so that a big part of his content is virtually the same. Here's an example of Black Pigeon Speaks' work regarding the UK. Number 1.
Wait, so now we're watching me reacting to Xanderhole, reacting to Three Arrows, reacting... A seagull if you will, reacting to an asshole, reacting to a German anti-fascist YouTuber, reacting to a Nazi pigeon. That's what's going on here right now.
Britain abolishes itself with the thumbnail reading UKSSR, which doesn't even make sense as an abbreviation, really.
The United Kingdom of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Number 2, UK Brave New Fahrenheit 1984.
Which one is it? Is it Bradbury's fucking dystopia, or is it Huxley's dystopia? Brave New Fahrenheit.
Okay. Number 3, UK Rise of the Police State.
Which is ironic because the cops in Britain, like the cops here, they love the fash.
Number 4, UK The Police State via Snoopers has arrived. Then another video about how the police state has arrived. But then I guess it went away for a moment, since after that the UK is supposedly descending into a police state again.
Which is really ironic because, again, yes, unquestionably the UK is a fucking police state. There's massive surveillance. The cops are getting all sorts of just ridiculous powers. I mean, but the thing is, the people who are mostly harmed by that aren't fucking fascists. If anything, the fascists benefit from it because the police state targets their fucking enemies.
And then the uploader ends on a twist with UK Rise of the Anarcho-Tyranny State.
Okay, the anarcho-tyranny state? Yeah, that's not how any of those things work.
If you're in the UK, maybe write a comment below at which state the UK currently is right now, because I've completely lost track. Anyway, all these videos are basically identical.
Nothing's changed. Nothing.
You just said it's all different, and that's why we have to look at these old videos, because people won't understand an entire third of a decade ago how different things were. Now you're saying nothing's changed? Which is it?
Things changed. The rights media made by right-wingers for right-wingers has always used sensationalized fear as the fuel for their content.
Wow, that's a fucking insight.
It's always what it's been. Nothing's changed.
Identical at their core. They might reference or rather misinterpret different news stories, but the takeaway never changes. Namely, the UK is either about to collapse or become an authoritarian regime, or something along those lines. Now you might...
Well, having spent a fair bit of time in the UK in the past 10 years, let me just say, the idea that you could one day feel like the country's about to fall apart, and the next day that it's going to turn into some sort of dystopian fascist dictatorship, and then the next day maybe fall apart again... That's actually kind of a relatable experience, because the country manages to give all of those impressions at once. It manages to look like it's going to fall apart. Everything's fucking crumbling. I mean, now, not as bad as here, I should say. I talk about how bad things are in Britain, and other people talk about how bad things are in Britain, and people in the US who don't realize how bad things are here by international comparison go, oh wow, we don't want to be that bad, and it's like, no, but actually from our perspective that bad would be an improvement. Like, I mean, I see people like, wow, the UK healthcare system is collapsing. Yeah, and even collapsing, they have better outcomes statistically than we do. Their collapse would be our fucking incremental improvement. But, yeah, I mean, the idea of not being able to tell whether the UK is turning into just an authoritarian, tyrannical dictatorship or is going to disintegrate altogether from one day to the next, that is a mood. That is just everybody, that's what everybody in Britain is going through.
I'd say, isn't that a bit cherry-picked of me to just pick 5 out of a bunch of videos? So just we're on the same page, here's another example about the country of Canada in no particular order. Canada, the dumpster fire globalist experiment vote.
Well, I mean, dumpster fire has aged well.
Canada 2019, world's first meme.
No. 3 Arrows is making me defend Canada. Are you serious?
Why would you have to defend Canada?
I'm gonna have to defend fucking Canada.
No, I'm not gonna defend fucking Canada. Because it's really easy not to defend Canada, because what the fucking chuds do, it's like, it's just like the chuds here in the U.S. will have, like, you know, the Let's Go Brandon yard signs. They're so proud of coming up with of a euphemism for fuck Biden. They think they invented hating Joe Biden. Like, we've been doing it for half a century on my side of politics. But yeah, you do you. And so and it's the same sort of situation really in Canada as well with hating Trudeau, because the right wingers have got all sorts of made up bullshit reasons that they don't like it. But really, if the exact same stuff was being done by one of their Tories, they'd be cool with it. I mean, there really is very little that they could possibly object to ideologically. Same as with fucking Joe Biden. There's nothing that they could seriously object to, except it's not their guy doing it. But so you don't have to defend Canada. You don't have to defend Trudeau. You don't have to defend Biden or Merkel to point out that the fascists are full of shit. In fact, the way you point out that the fascists are full of shit is to point out that actually the people that they're talking about are actually doing the things that they are advocating.
Fuck.
Country. Canada, the post-Western.
Also, nein, ich finde nicht, dass er hinter den Kulissen ein Fascho wäre, sondern, also da gibt's gar keine Kulissen, der ist ganz offen rechts. Der redet von Weißenfeindlichkeit. Der behauptet, Entkolonisierung sei das gleiche wie White Genocide und so ein Scheiß. Der ist rechts. Also, immer gewesen. Nur heutzutage leugnet er's. Ich meine, früher, also seine ganze Masche besteht darin, dass er sagt, ja, also früher, ja, war ich rechts. Also ein halbes Jahrzehnt ist das her. Ja, also sehr lange. Vor ganz, ganz langer Zeit. Und jetzt werde ich euch erklären, wie die eigentlich drauf sind. Aber in Wirklichkeit ist es einfach so, dass er immer noch rechte Scheiße von sich gibt. Also das, was er vom Darm lässt, ist so ziemlich immer irgendeine gequirlte rechte Scheiße. Also da gibt's nichts mit hinter den Kulissen.
Non-binary nation. Canada, the post-national meme with no future. Post-national country has no core identity. Canada abolishes itself. Canada, a nation crashing with no survivors.
Weird.
Canada has just joined the top 10 strongest economies in the world again,
Cringe.
by the way.
What? Oh, okay. That's some liberal shit. What exactly makes a strong economy?
Halal
Again?
Canada, diversity and the end of.
Wait, again? Wait, was Canada not in it and then was in it? Or wait, was in it, then not in it, and then now back in it? What did Canada ever do to you? I just think it's fun.
Well, let's see. There's that pipeline that they're building on Wet'suwet'en territory. There's all sorts of racist police shit. There's the fact that they essentially allow themselves to be sort of a subcontractor for their foreign intelligence service is just a subcontractor for the CIA for all intents and purposes. Yeah, and they were directly involved in the coup against the last elected government in Haiti in 2004. And not to mention that their mining companies are destroying Africa and Latin America.
Funny. I don't actually hate Canada or Canadians. I just think the memes are funny.
of free speech. If virtue signaling was a country, it'd be Canada, a warning for America. And number 10, Canada, the next failed state.
Oh god, he's starting to warn America now.
There are many, many more examples of this on the channel, and sometimes...
Canada is not a failed state. There's a lot to criticize about Canada.
And he won't know shit about it.
That's it. No, I'm just kidding. There is a lot to criticize about Canada's government.
Name
particularly, like, one of the most forefront issues that you'll see a lot of leftists talking about when it comes to Canada is the treatment of Indigenous peoples.
Oh, wow! Okay, there's a thing he does.
Especially historically, Canada has a very bloody and extremely fucked up history.
And not just, especially, I guess you could say especially historically, but right the fuck now. Right the fuck now, like in Wet'suwet'en territory, the fucking RCMP have had 4 years now, the mission to basically kick Wet'suwet'en people off of their land in order to build an illegal pipeline, and it was Trudeau who gave them the order to shoot to kill if that was necessary in order to make room for the pipeline from the company that he was bailing out.
When it comes to basically genociding the native population. This goes all the way back to, like, French colonizing of the land that would become Canada, all the way back in the day when the French and British first, settled it, and, going into the future. And even
in this context, it's worth remembering that, when fucking Xanderhole talks about Indigenous people, he's talking out his ass. Because he backed Bush to the hilt when Bush said decolonization was the same thing as white genocide.
To this day, there's some really fucked up shit. Like, obviously, the oil pipeline protesters that they, fucking bulldoze through. Because what people need to realize that fascism looks similar everywhere, and people say the same talking points about Canada as the U.S. Yeah, a lot of fascists.
Well, it is the same guy. He is going to just use the same talking points because he's the same guy.
That we've had to deal with, on the left, in the American left, are from Canada, ironically enough. But at the end of the day, America and its politics are so elevated, so, vitriolic and so inflamed, that even Canadian and British right-wing pundits basically exclusively talk about American politics.
Oh, I didn't know about that, actually. I mean, demonizing Trudeau from the right there's a whole industry around it. I mean, to the extent that you can buy fuck Trudeau yard signs, and it has nothing to do with people supporting Indigenous rights or anything like that. It's fucking Tories.
Because American politics is the easiest to sensationalize, and all right-wing news media is all about sensationalism. It dies without the...
Canadian politics isn't especially easy to sensationalize. I mean, because anything to do with Canada, outside of Canada, first you have to explain why... If you're dealing with an audience outside of Canada, and you're talking about shit that's going on in Canada, the first thing you have to do is spend 10 minutes explaining why anyone should care. Canadian, to the extent that, Canadian leftist content creators almost exclusively focus on non-Canadian shit, and because they know, the algorithm is gonna kill them if they start talking about, the latest sellout from the NDP, or, out of control housing inflation in the Lower Mainland in BC or something like that. Because first, it's going to take 10 minutes to explain to most of your audience who are not from Canada and don't know any of what those fucking words mean. What's the Lower Mainland? What's BC? Any of that shit. And you've already lost them by then. We should be aiming for prison abolition, really.
Sensationalism.
He goes as far as to just re-record a video he made in the past, but switch things around a bit.
Yeah,
here's a
that's
section
exactly
of the
what he's
video:
doing.
California, America's first third world state, and Dystopia, California.
Which is ironic because actually, if you look at just general, like, social health indicators. Yeah, you look at real wages, you look at things like worker rights and stuff like that. The U.S. actually as a whole is already much closer than pretty much anyone else in, like, amongst the major industrialized economies.
California, Windows.
It's like to the extent that one study that was just looking at, if you were to have equal income distribution worldwide or equal resource wealth distribution worldwide, what effect would that have on the incomes of people in various places? And in Europe, in both cases, there was going to be a decrease in income on average with, equal distribution, whether it was wealth or income. And in the U.S., it was actually going to be a slight increase in average income, just because the degree to which the benefits of U.S. imperialism are concentrated is much higher than in places like, Northern Europe, Western Europe, where there's a tendency to sort of distribute the spoils of imperialist bullshit more equitably, at least within the imperial core states.
Go to America's future side by side.
If California was an independent nation, it would be the 17th most unequal country in the world, tucked just between Honduras and Guatemala. Yes, those countries that send migrant caravans to the border now on a race.
Hey, you gotta hit that 10-minute timestamp, You gotta hit that 10 minutes for maximum mid-roll ads. What's he gonna do? He's gotta get those mid-roll ads. It's all about the money.
Regular basis. Canada, for example.
Yeah, it's echoing because he's playing two different videos side by side where it's the same audio. Well, it's not the same audio, it's the same script. He just fluffs up his videos to get the maximum amount of time he can squeeze in mid-rolls.
In comparison to the social democracies California attempts to ape, well, Canada, for example, is the 111th, and Norway is the 153rd most unequal countries, and that is out of 100.
Amazing.
Yeah, okay, but what's his point? I mean, yes, California, the wealth inequality is fucking off the charts. And a lot of that, and it's going to be interesting to see exactly what, now that climate change is actually making all the expensive housing in California uninsurable, it's going to be interesting to see, apart from just the fucking disaster that is, like, an entire region that is on fire for several months out of the year, which is deeply, deeply fucked up and ought to spur us on to do something about it. Maybe maybe it's time to actually, maybe that's something we shouldn't just kind of allow to go on. But also, house prices of uninsurable properties tend to go down pretty quickly. So it'll be interesting to see what that's going to do.
Before we go further into that, I don't really feel the need to point out that Black Pigeon Speaks is actually way more extreme in his political views than he can openly admit on a public platform. Myself and others already made videos laying that out, but I'm just gonna throw one in for good measure. Maybe you just caught that one of the thumbnails read the sentence Day of the Rake, which is a 4chan meme about the annexation or destruction of Canada. It's also a reference to the fiction book The Turner Diaries.
Yes. And I would imagine people in chat know what the original of that is.
In which at one point everyone in the US who is deemed a race traitor gets publicly hanged in an event called Day of the Rope. The book is basically the Bible of American white supremacists.
And not just American white supremacists. It has made a journey around the world. As far as anyone can tell, it was US military personnel who brought it to Central Europe in the 1990s and a little bit before. But essentially the result of this cross-pollination amongst fascists is that ideas from the Turner Diaries are extremely widespread. Like, you find them among Nazis in Germany and Poland and fucking, Central and Eastern Europe and Britain. It's everywhere. It is... Well, we're wrapping up fairly in just a couple of minutes. But, I have to say, I do not know anything about Boudreaux. I don't know anything about that case. And I don't know anything about the decision to release her. So, which is why I'm not commenting on it. I feel like I may have heard the name before, but other than that, nothing I would say would be the least bit enlightening on the subject, because I don't know a damn thing. I don't know a damn thing about the case, and I've only got about 6 minutes to one, and there's no way I'm going to be able to meaningfully look into this in a way that also is compatible with having some content for the last 6 minutes. That is why I'm not weighing in on that.
And is said to have inspired numerous terror attacks, like the...
But I would just note, 007 Oh Boy, you've made your point. I think everybody understands where you're coming from at this point. There's no need to hammer it home. And I tend to agree with you in the abstract, and I'm not applying that to the Boudreaux case or the Homolka case, because the fact is I know fuck all about them. And there's no way that I would say something about any of that that would be at all useful, except to in
the Oklahoma City bombing or the
myself.
1999 London nail bombings, as well as a bunch of other stuff. But again, whitewashing Holocaust denial is probably enough to indicate someone's politics. The UK and
You'd think, although these days whitewashing Holocaust denial is kind of considered a patriotic duty, because there's so much Holocaust denial going on in Ukraine, and the idea, basically the propaganda system has decided you can't have complexity. You can't say, you can't make the argument, yeah, actually, they do have a massive fucking Nazi problem that really needs to be sorted out, but that doesn't justify the invasion, and in fact the invasion's made it worse. So instead they just pretend, even though they themselves, major media outlets, up until about 2020, were reporting in great detail about just how bad the situation was. Now they act like the only reason, that even acknowledging that it's a situation is Russian disinformation. And that includes a lot of fucking, state-sanctioned Holocaust denial.
Canada are far from being...
Yeah, so a lot of Nazis on 4chan and whatnot will originate these very esoteric memes that when referenced, you're probably not going to...
I care, I just don't know anything about the case, and I criticize people on here all the time for talking about shit that they clearly know nothing about, and I don't want to be somebody who does that. I like to contribute to discussions when I actually have something worthwhile to contribute to them, and I know nothing about these cases.
Pick up on them, and then a year later, or whatever, you'll be like, wait, that's a Nazi meme? Damn it. And you'll remember Phoenix. You heard that somewhere, and you'll be like, fuck, that person was doing a Nazi meme. That'll happen. A lot of esoteric...
the examples you're giving aren't exactly terribly esoteric here.
Nazi dog whistles originate from 4chan and other
wow,
message boards
he's
like
bringing
that.
the knowledge here. Who knew that 4chan plays a role in the fucking online Nazi ecosphere?
if you've never been
Like,
on the
except
right,
everybody who's
if you
paid
don't
any
know like
attention.
how they devise their bizarre dog,
Nothing for you to be sorry about. Nothing for you to be sorry about in terms of, you know, of bringing the subject up or caring about the subject or anything like that. You don't have anything to apologize for. It's just it seemed like the discussion was had gone as, you know, had run its course, and I just don't have anything worthwhile to say about it because I don't know shit about it. So, like, seriously, nothing. As far as I can tell, there's nothing to apologize for in any part of it.
dog whistles, it's hard to identify them, but eventually you start to get good at it.
The only topics Black Pigeon Speaks repeats endlessly on his channel, and when boiled down to basics...
Okay, and with that, extending my heartfelt thanks to my camera for not freezing up on me the way it did every 5 minutes this afternoon. And thank you to everyone who's joined. Let me just say, if you enjoy the stream, please consider paying for the stream, which you can do using the tip command. And I will be back tomorrow night, same time, 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So I will see you then, and maybe I will see, depending on what my schedule looks like, maybe I'll actually look into those 2 cases and see what they are all about. They do sound fucked up, but I mean, beyond that, it's just nothing I can contribute. So have a good night, everybody.